I'm substituting for Nicholas Jarrold, the chair of the British-Croatian Society, as he cannot be with us tonight. I'm the event secretary of the British-Croatian Society, and I'm pleased that we're having the session this evening because I think it's one that might be of real interest. It's puzzled me for many years what it is that makes us members of the British-Croatian Society. And I think there are a great variety of answers. It seemed to me that this was something that was worth exploring, and we've done it through 3 email clips, which you will see shortly. And I'm hoping afterwards there will be a very lively discussion and contributions from the audience. I'd like to thank my granddaughter Esther Elbornova, who edited the film that we made, and I would encourage you all to join in the discussion after you've seen the clips. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. Right, so now we have a moment of truth. Can I share a video with you, or 3 videos? So I will start sharing the screen.
I didn't come to Croatia, which was then Yugoslavia, a sort of conscious choice. It was desperation to escape Cambridge, which is where we're talking now. I'd been in Cambridge for 5 years, and I had been in the pub, and it was a Monday evening, and I was listening to people who are as grey-haired and bearded as I am now, telling the same jokes they'd told for about 20 years. And I went home in gentle despair, and the next day was Tuesday, which in those days was Education Guardian. And I applied for every job that I had any hope of getting in the paper, one of which was to be a lector with the British Council in what was then Yugoslavia. My first evening, I asked for a recommendation for a restaurant, and I went just round the corner into a street that I think I've never known the name of, but it was part of what I think is now called Flower Square, Cetni Trg, which has another name, doesn't it? Trg Preradovićeva or something. And I was doing quite well. I was obviously speaking English, and I was offered some ham, and ham looked rather nice. And they said, would I like a little horseradish? And at first I thought, well, no, you don't have horseradish with ham, you have to have horseradish with beef. And I thought, well, never mind, I'll have some horseradish with my ham. And it came, and it was strange. It didn't look like horseradish at all, because horseradish for me was a creamy, sweet, white thing that came out of a jar. And this was grated and appeared to be a real vegetable. I thought, fair enough, I'll try some of this. So I cut a piece of ham and put a lot of horseradish on top of the ham and put it in my mouth and blew my head off. There was a difference there between Croatian horseradish and Yorkshire horseradish. Time and time again, those first few years in particular, you think you knew you were on solid territory in terms of food or culture or behaviour, and not quite. The ground shifted under your feet ever so slightly. Early, I suppose it must have been about 3 years into my time in Zagreb. I'd got to know Boba, my wife of many years now, and my Croatian had started to get a bit better, largely because of my stepson, Cico, who's now a huge old man of over 40. How old is he? 45 or something. And I just got to know Boba. And I'd been round for tea, and I left and was on my way home, and Boba told me that next time we met, that after I'd left, Cico had said, was it the case perhaps that Roy was ever so slightly mentally challenged? And she said, well, not that I've noticed, but why do you ask? He can't speak Croatian. And this was 2 years on, so this was a certain amount of motivation to learn to speak Croatian. And about a year later, having learned a certain amount, I offered my father-in-law at the time, I thought this through quite carefully, I offered to bury him. and I'll get the words wrong again, but what I offered to do was I meant to say, I'll pick you up from the bar and bring you home. And that would have been, I think, pokkupiti. And I offered to pokkopiti. And they all started at hysterics, and of course I didn't know till about 10 minutes later what I'd said. He'd never been a very well man, but he wasn't any nearer death at that time than he had been for most of the time I'd known him. Emily was 10, and she went to the little primary school down the road here in Cambridge. And she and Boba usually talked in Croatian, but after a couple of months, Emily said to Boba, she said, I'd rather you didn't talk Croatian to me in public. And Boba said, well, why is that? He said, they will think we're tourists. We decided he would go to boarding school, and he went to Sevenoaks. Boba was beside herself with grief, because in Croatia, children only went away to school if they were mad or bad, you know. And he was neither, not very, and went to Sevenoaks. And I remember I was in Berlin on a conference, and she came across to Berlin and was in a dreadful state. And I was not being very intelligent emotionally here. It took a long time for Boba to come to terms with her children going away. Emily was slightly easier because she'd had to practice with Tito, but early in Tito's time at Sevenoaks, there had been an England-Yugoslavia football match the previous evening. And I remember watching, I didn't think too much about it, but the next day Tito was playing football at school and was fouled and rolled around all over the floor in great pain, you know, as a result of this beastly attack. And the football master said, "Come on, get up, Domagoj. You know, you could be Croatian, Yugoslav, the way you're behaving." Leapt to his feet and said, "I am Yugoslav."
Right, apologies to everyone. I'm just, aha, there it is. The next one is here. Okay, let's go.
As some of you watching this film already know, I work in the Victorian Albert Museum and have done so for over 40 years. My connection with Croatia, in fact, started because of this. Fairly shortly after I joined in the mid-1970s, my head of department received a letter from the director of the Zagreb Decorative Arts Museum asking whether a colleague of hers could come and work with us in the department for 3 months on a scholarship offered by what was then the Yugoslav government, to which of course he agreed. And I remember seeing this letter lying on his desk. I was inclined to sort of read anything that was left lying about that might be of any interest in those days. Thinking, well, this will probably be some sort of middle-aged, elderly woman of not much interest to the rest of us, and was absolutely staggered by when she did eventually arrive. There was this gorgeous young 33-year-old with flame-red hair, and I readjusted my view. And that was actually my first meeting with Flora, who eventually, after various adventures, became my wife. After the 3 months that Flora spent with us, this led to an exhibition, a rather extraordinary exhibition of English silver. It's of the size and complexity which would be very difficult to mount and send these days. but it was a collection of over 120 pieces, ranging from the 16th century to the early 20th century. Many of the pieces from the V&A collections itself, many other pieces were lent from private collections and other public collections. And it was intended to go to Belgrade, and this was partly at a request of the British Council. They, in 1980, were faced with the fact that they were dealing with a new government led by Margaret Thatcher, whose views on the British Council were not quite as generous as predecessors, and they were anxious to establish a presence with her. And there happened to be a large economic forum taking place in Belgrade, and we agreed to actually send this exhibition out there in order to supplement the British diplomatic effort. And Thatcher, in fact, did open the exhibition in the Decorative Arts Museum there. As a result of that, Flora, of course, back in Zagreb, and keeper of metalwork in the Zagreb Decorative Arts Museum, put in a personal plea to the head of department to see whether in fact the exhibition could be extended to a tour to Zagreb, which wasn't initially going to be the case. And again, I mean, this is something that really couldn't happen these days. And this indeed was arranged. And I believe the British Council in fact found extra funding in order for it to transfer to the Zagreb position. We always send couriers on exhibitions like this, or indeed loans of any sort, to exhibitions anywhere in the world, and this might be anywhere in Europe, the United States, Japan, Australia, and so on. I have travelled to all those places as a result of this. And I saw an opportunity, of course, that this, for the installation of the exhibition in Zagreb, this might be to my advantage, and I managed to maneuver myself as a courier on the Belgrade-Zagreb transfer. And after that, one might say, you know, the rest is history. Within a year, we were married, and Flora moved to London. We have a child, now in his late 30s, who one might be judged as, I suppose, a direct result of the V&A. So there you have it. That is my connection with Croatia. And ever since, we have been going back there every year to the island of Hvar, where Flora has a family house.
I love living in London. There is wonderful people here, and but saying that, I still refer to home as Croatia. Zagreb is my hometown, and if I'm tired, I will start losing the words, and I will just say thing, you know, the thing. And then when I lose the plot, it's definitely, I will revert to Croatian. As the anger is that's the language that I will that will express my anger the best. We got involved with the Clan MacLean in 2002 when there was a big clan gathering in Scotland. And I mean, Scotland was always sort of within our sort of family life, as for my husband, they've spent a lot of time in Scotland. My memories of first time going to Scotland were not the best, because it was end of August and it was freezing. End of August is still really warm in Croatia, so it was a bit of a shock. But the beauty of the nature, it was just blew me away, and it's a special. It has a special sort of part of our family life. So yes, we are involved with the Clan MacLean. It's a sort of a symbiosis, I suppose. Croatia, Scotland, UK sort of British way of sort of living, and putting sort of two, or we could say three, different but very similar cultures together.
Any regrets about not having settled in Paris then?
No, no. It was the right thing. It was the right thing to do. I was very insistent on, when my two daughters were born, to speak to them in Croatian. We read a lot in, I would read them in Croatian. We would watch movies, cartoons. We did spend quite a bit of time, and I mean, not as much as I would want to, but with the business and working, it was quite hard. But we did. It was a huge. So for Catherine, particularly my eldest, Croatian was the first language for her. But then, of course, when she started going to school, that got lost. Fiona, of course, when she came, English was very much sort of more around, but they both speak Croatian, not very good, but I'm a sort of a quite, I suppose, hard mother in that sort of sense, where only perfection is good. But they understand Croatian really well. They understand Croatian way of thinking, the culture, the way that people behave, but they're still quite British. So it's a mix. It's a nice mix. I think they do have both nationalities. So they have an option if they decide to go to Croatia, or they want to live somewhere else in Europe. But will they ever want to live over there? I don't know. I would like them so that they spend a bit of time to even, well, I suppose we spend quite a bit of time in the summer, so they do get that that kind of fix. But yes, I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, life is like, I never thought, definitely, I never thought that I would live in the UK. So, well, it's an open road. They can decide what they want to. They have options, and they know they can do it. But I think those sort of things, it's in your heart. It's what you feel, and then what life brings as well. Okay, so here we are. That was cringing, I haven't seen this all the way. I think it was a premiere for Roy and for all three of us. So thank you to Esther, who put all this together. You could hear, three different stories. So from the two people who are British nationals, and one who was Croatian born, and the mix of culture. So is there anyone who would like to share a story or say something about your personal experiences? So do raise your hand, or there is a little sign reaction that you can do it. So let's hear you. You heard us, so go ahead. Who is the brave one? Ben? Yes, Ben, do you want to unmute yourself? Go ahead.
I'll go first. Being Zoom calls at the moment, so I'll go ahead. So my background is I'm half Croatian, half English. So I sort of definitely straddle the two parts of the films that you've shown. My dad was from Zagreb, and I spent a lot of time there as a kid, probably from the age of one or two every summer. And then later on in my life, my parents actually retired there. They bought a house on Ugljan, which is near Zadar. I sort of spent a lot more time sort of rediscovering my Croatian roots. But as a child, I really did feel like I didn't really fit in this country. So there was always something there. And my dad died 12 years ago. My mum came back to the UK, but I think he'd be very surprised to find out that I've actually got even more, thrown myself even more into my Croatian roots. So I've been taking language lessons. I spend a lot of time there. I take my kids on holiday every summer. And recently, I've actually expanded my business into Zagreb. So I'm hiring people out there and trying to be sort of an active part of, I work in software and the software industry out there. And yeah, I think my role is to continue my father's legacy, continue my Croatian heritage through my two boys who are 13 and 11, and sort of just keep that going.
Yes. And do they speak the language?
No, they don't. But they've spent a lot of time there, so they hear a few things. But my Croatian has a long way to go. But thankfully, they've removed the requirement now for the citizenship application. So I'm hoping it's going to be a bit more of a smooth process for me to get my citizenship, which is quite a complicated thing to do if anyone's done it.
Yes, it is. Yes, I do agree with you. It is. Yes, it's quite hard. But Croatian is a difficult language. It's not an easy language to learn. So one can understand that it's, you know, it's hard. I think it is very hard. So no one can blame anyone if they don't. Although I have to say, I do have a few words with my husband every now and again. I don't know about Flora. Flora, what about you? Do you ever have a word with your husband?
I try. Eric says that he was discouraged from the beginning.
By you and your friends.
Oh, not by me. So that, and he naturally is not very good with languages, although his father is a well-known linguist, and author of English-Australian dictionary, something like, you know, Serbian-Croatian dictionary or something like that, parallel. And to spot the differences between the two languages.
But I think
he learns more than he lets. I think that he's shy of speaking, but I think when I blab all day with my friends, that he understands what we are.
He understands, yes, I'm sure he does, yes. I think it's, I think we are hard. I think Croatians, we are really, really critical. If it's not perfect, it's not good, and that puts people off. And I think particularly British, I can see this with my family, you know, my husband or, you know, my children, because no, this is no good. You should speak properly.
It doesn't put me off.
Oh, that's good.
My Croatian
really
is very inexact and reasonably fluent. And when Emily was learning, when she was younger, Boba would attempt to sort of correct Emily's Croatian, to which Emily's response was, well, Daddy says it like that.
That's excellent. Right. I think we had Boyan and then there is Peter who wants to say, but Boyan, would you like to unmute yourself and go ahead?
I think I have now unmuted myself.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Well, this is partly in order to say and boast that Alison speaks Croatian. And I don't know whether any other such mixed couples have had previous experiences of trying to use Croatian as a secret language of communication, say in a street or on a bus. And we thought that up to a point, we don't know exactly when, in the early 21st century, that no longer was possible, because you could never be sure whether there wasn't within earshot somebody who could of course understand it. So that fell down as a possible chance of using a secret language. Though we still sometimes use it, certainly in our neighborhood here, where we know that there are no other speakers, and in our street, for instance. And that works up to a point. And it's very useful sometimes.
It's fantastic. I think that's such a lovely way to say it. Maybe I will try with my husband. Maybe he will like that idea.
I'd like to know whether there was anybody else who uses it to the same.
Anyone else who would like to elaborate on this?
Yes.
Susanna and Robert, is that your secret language?
No, we've had too many experiences on the underground where people sat opposite us or next to us speaking the language. So in London, because of the numbers of tourists around, it's never foolproof, or hardly ever foolproof. Even if they're not from Croatia, there are chances, the neighboring countries where they understand, the chances are that there will be somebody that will understand you. Because I know when I've been on the tube on my own, that I've heard people opposite or nearby in the carriage speaking. So, yeah.
Yes, well, the fact that Croatians are, I think, second diaspora, I think, after Ireland, all over the world. So the chances are pretty huge that someone will be speaking the language or understand bits of it. Peter, you want to...
I have something I can add to that. I was traveling some years ago in a very, very remote part of Ethiopia. And I was being hassled by kids, where are you from? Where are you from? And I wanted to put them off. So I said, Croatia. And it didn't put them off at all. They said, do you know there are a lot of Croats down the road who are building a dam? This was in remote Ethiopia. But the other point I'd make about language is that in my case, I maintain that my Croatian gets worse every year because I have fewer and fewer opportunities to use it. When I first bought a property in Croatia in 2000, I had to do everything in Croatian, the electricity, having the bathroom done and so on. Now, almost everybody that I come into contact with prefers to speak to me in English.
Yes, yes.
That's the problem, yes. I think Mira wanted to say something. Mira, go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
There you are.
Well, I wanted to say something about sort of husbands and wives learning Croatian. Certainly, I was married to an Englishman who sadly died, but he spoke Croatian so well that when we were in company in London, there was a mixed company, Croats and English. It was at Gabriela's house. And most English people left before, and Croats never know when it's time to go home. So we were among the last ones left. So Predrag Stojčić said, oh, thank God, it's only Croats left. Now I can speak in Croatian. So Michael said, what about me? I said, praviš English. So he spoke so good English that, even Predrag, who is Zagreb born, he didn't believe he was an Englishman.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it did help. I remember when we went to Liberty's shop in London many years ago, and we exactly thought like Bojan meant we could safely speak Croatian among ourselves. We were buying some curtain material, so we looked at it and pushed each other. So I visit your school for me. And the girl said, no, it's not too expensive. So that was the end of that story.
Yeah.
But needless to say, both children speak Croatian. Even the granddaughter has done English for all levels. So the language lives. The language
Fantastic.
lives. Yeah.
Yes. I think we have to persevere. I think we Croatian born, and then people who have the heritage half or whatever, but there is a bit of Croatian. I think we need to try to work on it and persevere with teaching and continuing, with language, because I think that's very important.
Interesting for them and really liking it. I know our children just as much like going every summer to Croatia, and this year is a big question. Are we going? Aren't we going? Can we go? Can we start booking? So I'm really pleased that they love the country and they love Croatia. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I saw someone else who wanted to. Yes, yeah. Katie, and yes, go ahead, Eric. Sorry. Well, sorry. Do you mind if I let Katie to say something?
Please.
Then you. Thank you. Katie, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to say I've lived in Dubrovnik for 3.5 years now. And I was just going to say, thinking about what Peter was saying about everyone here is speaking English all the time. And the amount of people who say, oh, I'm so sorry that my English is not very good. And I say, but we're in Croatia. My Croatian is very bad. I'm learning, but slowly. And they're so apologetic that their English isn't very good. And I keep saying, well, no, your English is far better than mine. I'm in Croatia. I should be speaking better. But what you were saying about being a perfectionist, sometimes when I'm with my neighbours and I try and say something, they'll say, oh, no, you said that wrong. And I'll say, well, how do I say it? And they'll say, and I'm thinking, I'm sure that's what I just said. And they'll say it, and then I'll say it, and they go, no, it's wrong. And, oh. But as you say, it is a very, very difficult language.
Yes, it is. But I think we are quite, we will correct you straight away if it's not right.
Well, I've started teaching in Vertage here, so that's helping me, because as I'm teaching the children English, I'm having to learn the Croatian words to help them, and I'm often saying to them "Kako se kaže," so they're happy that they're helping me with my Croatian. So
yes. No, I think children, that's the best way. That was for me personally when I used to live in France, so that's how I learned my French. So I was with children most of the time, and that's the best way. They don't correct you. So I think spend time with sort of kids who will help you advance your English. Yeah. Eric, go ahead. Thank you, Katie.
Well, I was just in reference to sort of a secret language. My children, my stepson and our son, sort of would revert to Croatian with their mother when there's usually some complaint about me, about what I asked them to do, told them to do, whatever. So I could actually construe the general drift of what was being said, if not the detail. And I just sort of throw that into the mix. Insofar as my background goes, I actually have a tin ear for languages. I was absolutely right about that. My brother, on the other hand, is quite extraordinarily fluent in Aboriginal languages, which is, he lives in Broome in northwestern Australia. These are talents that I don't share with the rest of my family. My father was the linguist. My mother was interested in much more visual things, and I actually take my interests from her rather than my father. But just a moment to say about where my mother grew up in New Zealand, in the north of New Zealand, near a town called Dargaville. And we were visiting there as a family. And I was rather struck. There's a habit in New Zealand of actually announcing the entry into a town and when you're passing the city limits. And in this place called Dargaville, there's a farewell on a sign, and underneath Harare in Maori, and on the third line below it's Zabogan. And I thought, goodness me, what on earth is going on here? And I began to sort of ask around. And in Dargaville, which was the nearest town to which my mother grew up, she grew up on a dairy farm. there was a community of some 30,000 Croat, or Dalmatians, in fact, emigres, which in New Zealand terms is huge. And I quizzed my mother about this and said, oh, yes, yes, well, there was some, she really had no idea just what the extent of the Dalmatian community was on her doorstep. And I can only put this down really to the fact that actually living on an isolated farm, I mean, it was quite clear from what she told me about her childhood, was that the family really very seldom integrated into the local communities. Unfortunately, her parents seldom integrated with each other for that matter, but that's another story. But it was a surprising fact that it was only actually after I got married to a Dalmatian that I discovered that there was this legacy in my mother's upbringing, of which she was actually really largely unaware.
May I add that we haven't heard from Alan, and when I met Alan, of course, because of his wife Ksenia, he is a great linguist, he learned Croatian. But if he didn't know the right word, he will make it up. And I must say something very funny. Alan went to the pharmacy in Zagreb and thought, oh, I need a deodorant. And instead of just saying deodorant, he thought, oh, it must be another word. And then he said, molim jedan antismrt. Antismrt. He made it up, you know, because the courage that you can do something with the words you know. Isn't it right, Alan?
I think that's absolutely excellent.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I've got, you know, endless stories of language misunderstandings and so on. And
do share them with us, please, because that's excellent. I think antismrdi is
some other antismrdi.
Yes, of course. I met a beautiful young lady in Oxford in 1963, and I asked her which country she was from, and she was from a country where I'd never met anyone before, which was Yugoslavia. And the rest is history. We eventually got married, but not, and she's sitting beside me now, but not before I'd been to Zagreb to meet her family several times. I met Flora, I think that was after we got married. And we went around various parts of Croatia and Yugoslavia. And I remember many differences. The differences started appearing to me from the very first visit. And the smell of Croatia was the first, one of the first impressions. There was a different smell in the air. There was a smell of petrol that had been, what do you do to petrol? You refine it. Yes. Petrol that had been refined in a different way. There was a different smell. It's no longer the case. There was sort of, I remember traveling from Zagreb to Split by car, and we were in some remote mountain area. And I spoke very little Croatian at that time. And I remember we had a Volkswagen Beetle. It was coming on to be evening, and we were going back to Zagreb from the seaside. And suddenly, out of nowhere, came a very menacing looking policeman on a motorbike in a fabulous uniform, who stopped me. There was nobody else around. He stopped Ksenia and myself. And I stopped the car, and he walked round and round it very slowly, looking extremely menacing. And I said, Ksenia said, what's wrong? And he said, you know, you haven't got a side light on the left-hand side. I said, oh no, oh, I didn't know that. It must have gone out recently. I said, I'll get it fixed when we get to Zagreb. And he drew out a booklet where he could write out fines for not having a side light. And he started writing this fine for me. And he said, "Where are you going?" And we said, "Zagreb." And now, so far, that could have happened anywhere. It could have happened in Britain or anywhere else. And he said, the next word shocked me. He said, "What street?" I thought, "What street? Where were we going? Ambrusheva or something. What street?" So we said, Ambrusheva. I was, no British policeman wouldn't ask you what street you're going to. And he said, "What number?" And we said a number. And he said, "Do you know?" And then he mentioned a woman's name. And Ksenia said, "Do we know her? But she's our neighbour. She's my mum's best friend." "Oh," he said. And he tore up the fine, which he hadn't finished writing anyway, and threw it away. And I thought, yes, this was a form of corruption I hadn't come across yet. It's not what you know, but who you know is true everywhere. But I noticed it was particularly true in Croatia. Another language story I have is recently here in London, I had to go into the Royal Free Hospital. This was about 20 years ago. I had to go to the Royal Free Hospital for a piece of day surgery, a minor piece of day surgery. And being day surgery, all the day surgery patients are lined up, irrespective of gender, in a line. And next to me on my right was a woman. And Ksenia came to check me into the hospital and so on. And we started talking Croatian. And this woman in the next bed looked across at me and said, "Vi ste naš čovjek. You are our man, you're one of us." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not actually. I'm English." She was a Bosnian lady, but I said, no, I'm not. I'm English. But yeah, you couldn't use it as a secret language. And there was the a misunderstanding in language. This is a little bit risque. But the first time I came to Zagreb was by that awful train journey from London via Munich, was it, and Salzburg and so on, and hours and hours in the train. And got out at Zagreb. It was winter, there was snow, and nobody had come to meet me. They got I don't know why, they got the train wrong, the time of the train wrong. And it being evening, I was suddenly surrounded by rather elderly women, all begging me for something and saying what, in a stream of language, saying one word I understood, which was the word spavati, to sleep. And I thought, just for a moment, are these ladies of the night, are these prostitutes? Are they this old in Zagreb? Gosh, yes, I knew there were differences, but anyway, no, of course, they were asking me for if I wanted a room. So was yeah, and so on. Yeah, I noticed many differences over the years between the way things have gone about in different countries, Britain and Croatia, and so on.
I think with all with all these sort of kind of differences, what I kind of feel that I hope what I feel that you don't feel threatened. I hope none of the sort of people who are British heritage, that when they went to our part of the world, never had sort of experiences where they felt threatened. I think they were always sort of maybe unusual, like this offering to sleep somewhere, you know, offering you a room, and a misunderstanding. But I think even with the police, I think you don't feel sort of that they will threaten you. I mean, talking about the police, last summer we had Masha, yes, I can see you, yes. Just want to say about the police, where they were asking, unfortunately we were speeding in the boat, and my husband, I didn't want to know, I pretended I was British at this point, I didn't want to be Croatian at that point. And the policeman was asking about my husband's father's name, which in Britain you would never be asked. but they wanted to know, and that's one of the kind of unusual thing what they ask. Unfortunately, we didn't have neighbors to share. We didn't have a common neighbor, so we had to pay the fine. But I think he deserved it. He did speed too fast. Stop me talking. There is Masha who would like to say something, and also Isabel. So Masha, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes, of course. I've gone the other way in that I'm a Croatian resident. I'm a Brit. Masha's been here since the 4th of July. She is getting a little bit stir crazy. Orebić isn't the most exciting place in winter. But we have our business in Korčula with our restaurant and hotel and our music festival. You know, so I'm a sort of somewhere between Orebić and Korčula. We're going to move to Korčula this year because we're restoring a house there. My Croatian isn't very good. I have a very good understanding, but I'm terrible at speaking it. But I really have no issues. Life is pretty easy here. We do have the odd storm in winter, but by and large, the weather's rather nice as well.
Yes,
And
we've eaten, isn't it? The weather.
Yes, and we've eaten and drunk very well this winter. People keep on giving us things. We had a beautiful rack of venison from Slavonia with some sausages, constant supply of fresh Hungarian duck, and venison stews, thanks to various supermarkets in Dubrovnik.
Wow.
As well as, of course, a great supply of local vegetables and all the citrus fruits we get at this time of year. And we just had a bunch of marmalade made with our own wild oranges.
Wow.
So life here is not too tough.
In your restaurant, the pekmez, will you be serving it in your restaurant?
No, I'm not certain our marmalade quite comes up to the standard of our restaurant, but I might try to persuade the chef.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Fantastic. And do you think that you do you hold a festival in your place?
Yes, we have a music festival every year.
Yes. So did you manage to hold it last year?
We held it last year, and this year will be our 10th.
Wow.
And we'll hold it again. And we had live performances last year, carefully distanced. We had no issues. And I mean, the pace of vaccination here is glacial. So I'm not certain how it'll be this year, but I'm sure we'll hold a festival.
Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yes, yeah, we're crossing our fingers. Yeah. Yeah, so greetings from Orebić.
Thank you. Thank you. Isabel, would you like to unmute yourself? Go ahead. Share your story.
I had to smile when I was listening to Alan saying about getting away with things because he was one of them, because I'm fortunate enough to be able to speak the language. My mother brought us up speaking Croatian and Polish. My father was Polish. My mother's still alive speaking, she speaks Croatian, obviously, but she brought us up dual language. But when you go abroad, I have a little sailing story. I went sailing with some British friends, my husband and I. They didn't know a word of Croatian, still don't to this day, but we were in, I can't remember what bay it was, but we kind of sailed into this little bay, and it was getting dusky and dark, and then suddenly out of nowhere, as happens, if those of you who've been lucky enough to be sailing, these dodgy looking men pulled up in a speedboat, very fast speedboat with white t-shirts, sort of very, very, look at us, you know, we are kings here. And they came up to us and started to say, you have to pay, you have to pay. And we were saying, and I pretended I didn't know the language at that point. And I said, what? So this is ridiculous. How can you say this? You have to pay for bay. You have to pay, mooring. I said, and then I got, after about 10 minutes of leading them on, I burst forth in my best Croatian. And they said, ajo, ona je naša. And then got away with a fine, got away there. And they had the cheek to say, can we have a Karlovačko pivo, please? So I thought, well, for the cheek of it, yes. But one example of the language being useful and knowing the language. And yes, when we were little, my brother and I used to be very, very naughty about people that we really didn't like when we were shopping with mum and dad. We pretended we didn't know. We were embarrassed to know. I think somebody else mentioned it. I think it was Ben. We didn't want to speak Croatian or Polish when mum and dad used to take us shopping, and they'd embarrass us by talking in Polish and Croatian, saying, no, mama, nemoj prestani. But anyway, yeah, so that's my little story.
Right, I'm sorry, my husband is in the kitchen preparing dinner, so there's a bit of noise going on in the background, so I was sort of pausing it. Who else would like to share a story, a funny story? Susanna, go ahead. Yes, you did raise your hand, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, aside from the language, and Peter tried to persuade me as well to make a film, and then just didn't to record a film, and just somehow didn't happen for one reason or another. But there is the issue of home, I think, as well, where the home is. For us, for example, and I don't know what other people's experiences are and thoughts on that, but I just happened to notice myself talking. For example, when I spoke to my mother, and last time I was there, or a few previous occasions, I was in Zagreb, and I said when I go home to her, meaning when I go back to London. But also when I'm here, if people say, "Oh, when are you going home?" meaning going to Croatia. So it's just that that brought it to my to the fore, you know, thinking where the home actually is, because we enjoy things, you know, over the years. It's in April, it's going to be 30 years that I've been in this country, and I know that many people have been on this call have been much longer as well. At first, especially when I came to London, I enjoyed discovering Croatian connections to London, such as, I don't know, Kenwood House nearby, or Fitzroy Square, you know, where the embassy is, and of course meeting British people with the Croatian connection through the society. And then the same thing when in Croatia, discovering various influences and quirky things about Britain in Croatia. For example, I never knew until we visited Vis that there was the one and only cricket club on the island of Vis, and similar things. I did think about it, you know, a lot more since, and I think, for me at least, and I believe many others as well, that home is where the heart is. So it's in both countries for me.
Yes, I can relate to that sentiment. It's hard, you know, it is both, their home both. Vesna, would you like to add to this?
I just want to say that as we were the family who moved around a lot, and we started our married life in Pakistan after Malcolm was with British Council in Zagreb in 70s, in early 70s. And wherever I went, there was always Croatian, or then still Yugoslav community. Very soon after you arrived, you'd meet people who usually had quite a lot to do with, in any sense, culturally and linguistically, of course. And it was so in Pakistan. Even when I went to Afghanistan at the time, I met someone in Afghanistan who was hitchhiking through all the Near East and the Far East, and found himself in Afghanistan, and he had only one leg, and he was walking, and he was from Croatia. You met absolutely incredible people, and lots of people who worked at UN from Croatia. And then wherever we lived, in Milan, in Rome, in Paris, there was always Croatian community. And even the other day, I was phoning a chiropodist, and she said, "What's your name?" I said, "Vesna Hadji." "Oh, you're from Croatia," she said, and she was Croatian. It's actually, we are so spread all over. I suppose it's in everybody's experience that and home is where you feel like home. So for me, it's Croatia, and it's England, and it's Italy, where I speak the language, know the culture. And wherever you go, you are one of ours.
Exactly.
They will tell you. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael. You want to add something to it?
Yes, what Esther said reminded me of something that happened in 2005. I was visiting Kabul, where my daughter was working for Reuters at the time. And there was a Croatian restaurant there called Zadar, run by a woman from Zagreb. And we went and had dinner. When we started speaking Croatian to her, she just went, "Yoi!"
Incredible. Yes, I have to say I had experience.
Yes. The fish wasn't very fresh.
Yeah.
But
there is no sea in Kabul, I presume.
Not much, no, not much, and quite a long way.
Yeah.
But the food was great.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, anyone, any sort of a British side of the story to add to it? Anyone who didn't say anything, don't be shy. Go ahead, share your story.
Snezhina, I just wanted to add one thing, what I forgot to say earlier, but in our block in Pula, where we live, and also in Pula in general, Robert and I are known as the English. when we come to, there is a beach where we go regularly, and in our block as well, but on the beach. So when we arrive, there are other regulars as well. And then when we get there, they usually said, "Inglesi su stigli."
Sorry, Vesna, go ahead. You have your hand up.
I just wanted to say, when I took my son, he was 4.5, first day to school in Paris, across Champ de Mars, and I was speaking to him in Croatian, and he said to me, "Don't speak to me in this language, speak in me in English, otherwise nobody's going to think we are French." So that was
that's the child sort of logic.
Confusion.
Yes, too many languages. What about, can I actually ask maybe Emily or Esther, because you are sort of second, sort of third generation. How do you look at this sort of, well, sorry, Esther doesn't have sort of Croatian, but it has the, I presume you spend time in Croatia. So how do you see, that's a sort of kind of a one step kind of further down the line, how do you see this sort of British Croatianness or Croatian as British mix?
I mean, my dad doesn't remember much from Croatia. He was there when he was quite young, but I am Slavic, so I do relate to a lot of the things people have said. And I've just recently moved to Britain, and it's really interesting the way people view Slovakia. And usually people have very strange assumptions about Eastern Europe. And I've received a lot of strange questions. One of my teachers asked me if we have yogurt in Slovakia, which I thought.
You are muted. Sorry, Esther. So we lost you.
Oh, where was I lost?
Because we heard they were asking you about yogurt. That's a strange sort of.
Yeah, if we have yogurt in Slovakia. Yeah, which we do.
I think everywhere in the world there is yogurt. Maybe not in
Yeah.
China. I think Far East, they don't like dairy products.
20 years ago, there wasn't much yogurt in Britain, I think. Yeah. Yogurt was a strange thing, yes.
Right, okay.
Not according to Colinda.
Emily, would you like to add something to it? Go ahead.
It's a really big question. I guess, what would I say? It's interesting because I think, so I'm 33, and I guess when I was younger and I told people that I had a Croatian mum, they maybe didn't know very much about Croatia. I remember when I was 10, my you know, it was like after the summer holiday, and my headmaster came into the class and was asking everyone where they went. And I said that I'd gone to Croatia, and he was like, why would you want to go there? There's a war going on, which wasn't very accurate. But I guess as kind of time has gone on, now everyone's like, oh my gosh, Croatia, I've been there, I loved it. So I think, so I guess other people's responses have maybe changed over time. I don't know, there are lots of things that I would connect with. I think, I wonder, I guess it's that thing of, I think when you're kind of a mixture, you maybe sometimes have that feeling of kind of being part of both at the same time, but maybe not fully either. And I sometimes think that I think that for me anyway, I think it took a little bit of time to kind of maybe accept that, but actually now I'm very happy with that. And I think it's a kind of, it's not like one is better than the other, but I think there's actually something very special about being bicultural. And actually, I read a book recently by an author who, she's Brazilian British, and at the end she had a really nice thank you to her parents, which was to thank them for her hybrid name and her hybrid life. And I thought that was a really lovely description. And I think before I used to describe myself more as like, I'm half Croatian, I'm half British, was actually, it's not really half, but it's more just a mix.
Yeah, I think that's lovely. That's lovely what you said. Yes, because you see, you're just, with my children, they're slightly sort of younger. So everyone here who's got children who are maybe teenagers or early 20s, they're not sure about this. You know, they don't want to be different. So I think my children don't really, so that's why they're not here. They're not next to me about it, because they're not yet confident about that mix. Do like it, and when they're over there and spend time, and they mix very well with all the Croatian neighbors and friends, but at the moment that's still not there. But I think as one becomes, you know, more adult, you accept and you cherish the, as you say, the hype, you know, sort of togetherness of it.
And your link doesn't depend on how well you speak and know how to use cases. You know, I guess if I think for myself, it's like being brought up by my Croatian mom and having my Croatian grandmother, and like how much kind of influence do you get through that, through, I don't know, things that are said or food, or, you know, even today I can't go out without like having fully dried my hair because my mum has drilled it into me that you're going to get pneumonia if you go out. So I'm 33, but she'll check it if I'm at home, and even if she's not around, I kind of have internalized it. So, you know, it's much more more than just how well you speak the language, I think.
Exactly. So that all those little things. Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, I think from all our stories, what it comes across is that we have so much in common, and then we have these little quirks. I mean, I suppose we didn't say anything about the British sort of quirks that are there, which are some of Croatian, Susanna, Flora, Željka, we could talk about. That would be another sort of an hour or two of talking about it. I hope we will continue this conversation. Peter, would you like to say something and close the meeting for tonight?
Thank you. I enjoyed the meeting very much, I must say. I had wondered what people would say, and it's been entertaining. Thank you all very much. And can I just finish by telling you that we continue to have a British-Croatian Society programme despite all the problems that the lockdown imposes on us. We have our next meeting already scheduled in a month's time, when Bojan Bujic will be talking about a fascinating book published in 1563 of Croatian poetry, and how this book came to be in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. We've got one or two other talks that are in the pipeline before the summer, and at the end of June, providing the lockdown rules allow it, we hope to have an annual general meeting where we meet really, not virtually. And if we do so, because an annual general meeting is ultimately extraordinarily boring, we will make it into a social event. Obviously, it all depends upon the virus and our ability to do that. But to rest assured, the British-Croatian Society will continue its programme, whatever the circumstances. In the meantime, thank you everybody for a very entertaining evening. Thank you. Good night.